Hey, what's up, Nerd fam? This is your boy Gashawn. I want to welcome you to Enter the Nerd. Today, we are going to talk about The Harder They Fall. It's a movie on Netflix that I believe came out about 2 weeks ago. I'm a little late with this review, but there is some really cool things I want to talk about. I believe this movie's premise is really cool. It's a Western with a pretty much all-principal black cast with some awesome talent in it. And Jonathan Majors, R.J. Cyler, Zazie Beetz, obviously directed by Regina King, who's also starring in this movie as well. Idris Elba, Lakeith Stanfield, just so much talent in this movie. And obviously the plot is very straightforward. So once again, I shouldn't say it before, but I'm saying it now. There are spoilers in this video. So if you haven't watched it, do not watch this video. But back to the plot. Just the plot is pretty straightforward. The main character is wronged by the antagonist, who actually kills his family right in the beginning, his mother and his father. He becomes an outlaw because of it, and it leads them on a collision course between their respective groups together to a final confrontation, and so on and so forth. It's pretty straightforward. But I remember thinking something the entire time this movie was on. I kept thinking to myself, watching this movie, while I'm enjoying this movie, and it's a really fun movie to watch, these characters are not just characters. These are actually real people, most of them. Trudy, that was Regina King's character. She was made up just to kind of be a foil for Zazie Beetz' character, which we're definitely going to get into much later in this video. Now, I know watching some of the coming attractions, because I looked at it, I wanted to make sure that maybe they weren't saying they were trying to be historical. Maybe they just knew they were going to have fun with it. But I was watching the little excerpts they had, Regina King talking about, we want to talk about, the black cowboys, people didn't know these people existed and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm actually down with that. The issue is this movie does not accurately portray really any of the people that are on here. And if it were me, I probably would have gone a different creative way and made more like an anthology series that follows each of these different characters, because each of these people in real life led really, really cool lives. Actually much cooler than what you're seeing here. And actually, in order for them to all appear here, they had to be considerably dumbed down and changed. And a lot of their nuance was taken away from their character because, like I said, in real life, these are fully fledged people who led really interesting lives. I just wanted to go through some of those people pretty quickly, just so you can understand what we missed, just some of the cool stuff. So, starting off with Nat Love, right? That's the character played by Jonathan Majors. Obviously, just in that time, it's not surprising, he's like the son of slaves, but he's also probably one of the most famous cowboys in American Western history. He was a cattle rancher. He fought a whole bunch of guys who were trying to steal cattle. He got captured by the Pima Native Americans. They respected his heritage because a lot of the people in that tribe were particularly mixed with also other African Americans. They wanted him to marry the chief. He didn't. He ran away. He also wound up meeting like Billy the Kid and stuff like that on a ranch. And then he became like a Pullman, which is somebody who works for like the railroad. And then even an author later on and wrote his own autobiography. He had a really, really, really interesting life, right? And also he like trained himself to be like an expert marksman. That's pretty awesome. No Rufus Buck needed, no vendetta needed. That was just his life, right? So you didn't need all that to make him interesting. Speaking of Rufus Buck, right? Rufus Buck was not a grown man. He actually was like a teenager. Him and the Rufus Buck gang were just a group of people who were not just black, but they were black and mixed Creek Native American. He was mixed heritage, and pretty much the rest of his gang was as well. And that played a lot into his story because, number one, not only did they want to be like the most reckless gang that was out there, but they were angry because of what white people at the time were doing to their reservations, like, raping their women and stuff. So they figured, you know what, we're going to do the same, which is why one of the major crimes that him and his gang did was rape and obviously murder and tons of other things. But these were just reckless teenagers who also were just so filled with rage and overall adolescence, just could not discern like the right and wrong actions in a whole year of a crime spree until they got hung, right? Now, that would have been cool to show like the complicated nature of it and just honestly the pretty heinous nature of who they were, rather than trying to humanize them. Because I'm gonna go back to the main plot of the movie. I didn't really understand why Idris Elba left this guy live, because he pretty much created his own problem, right? You let him live, now he's coming back. I put the cross in your hand so I can know when you coming back for me. Why? Just so he could kill you? That didn't make much sense to me. So even with that was a way to try and humanize him. But if you look at the actual person, it's kind of built in already. Mind you, he was a menace, but a lot of it was just anger, like pent up anger to things that they had already experienced, right? So who do you go with? Stagecoach Mary, right? Zazie Beetz' character. First thing we have to point out, she looks nothing like the character. And a lot of people like to talk about colorism and stuff like that. It's like, this is interesting, because a lot of people were really mad that Zoe Saldana was playing Nina Simone. But at least in that thing, they even tried to put, prosthetics and try to make her darker. Even though I understand, they were like, hey, why don't you just get a dark-skinned actress? Makes sense, right? But in this one, they just completely made her not look like anything like the original person. And they pretty much terraformed the character to be something different that fits Zazie rather than her fit the historical figure. Once again, I want to point out, these are not made-up characters. These are people who actually existed, right? So with Stagecoach Mary, so she had an interesting life. So not only, obviously, once again, beginning a lot of servitude, makes sense for the time. And then she even was in a convent, I believe. But she was so kind of like, she was boisterous and stuff like that. Like she was really rowdy. She could defend herself, and she liked like hanging out with the boys and stuff like that, more than she liked being, even though she took care of people, took care of children, and the people who she cared for, or that she was in service to, actually really trusted her. Like they trusted her to like go across a state with 5 of their children to go visit someone else. And she was so rough that she defended these kids with like guns, and people they didn't really mess with her. She was always a badass, right? And even after she helped this lady start like a Native American school, which was cool. I think at the age of like 60 something, she became the first African American woman to get like the star route. Pretty much, it just means that she is going from one route to another, guarding mail, bonds, whatever is in there. And once again, she was armed. People were over there trying to get the mail from her, and they could not. She was a badass, and she was so known in Cascade, Montana, that eventually, even when like her house burnt down, like the town, which was not just filled with black people, built up her house again. And even when she died, the whole town was around, and she was the biggest funeral because she was just that respected. Do you get any of that in this movie? No. She's got her own saloon, and she's dancing, and she's a love interest, and then she's supposed to be rough, and it turns into a damsel in distress. It's strange. Like, they had an opportunity to really flesh that character out. Cherokee Bill, another character, don't look like that. And for some reason, they also took that away from him. He used to be in the Civil War at some point. Like, he had like a whole saga where he was separated from his mother, came back, she was remarried. He like killed his stepbrother. He was a really messed up guy too. Like, a lot of these cowboys were not good people. Like, a really messed up guy. And eventually he was hanged as well after doing all types of messed up stuff, right? Which you could also use to flesh out, everything that happened. Him being in the Civil War, him running away, them chasing after him, and it just building up this really angry and messed up individual. But it makes sense, right? That's just the times where we're in, right? Boss Reeves, that's played by Delroy Lindo in this movie. Boss Reeves is another guy who he captured like 3,000 people, killed 14 in self-defense. Like, he was just a badass. He was the first African American deputy in, I think, the west of the Mississippi, something like that, which is awesome. And he even had to arrest his own son for murder at some point. But that's just how much, close to his duty, like what the law meant to him. Like, he couldn't let his son slide with that. And obviously that would have been like a really cool moment to see him like rising in the ranks, becoming a deputy here, and all these different lawmaking states, and showing the, obviously, being born to slaves and stuff like that. Because he wasn't half white. The person who was half white was Jim Beckworth, R.J. Seiler's character. The one I was talking about, I want to see how fast you are, which once again wasn't a thing. He's actually a fur trader. What happened with him was he was in like he was like a frontiersman, and he actually even like hooked up with the Crow, because he was half black and half white, I believe. He even hooked up with the Crow tribe, married one of their chiefs, became like a crazy warrior. Apparently, he was like, I think they called him like Bloody Arm or something like that, because he was just so great at fighting and had like the highest honor of warrior in that tribe. He was involved in a Mexican-American war. Like, tons of really cool stuff. He even put some paths, like there's actually a pass in Nevada called like the Beckworth Pass, which is something that he discovered, which allows settlers to go through there later on. He's a really cool character. He wasn't just some like some young idiot kid that was like, I just want to see how fast he is. A comedy relief. That wasn't what he was. He had some really cool stuff. Bill Pickett, that was the other guy who was kind of like a sharpshooter. In real life, he was like a rodeo dude, and he actually invented bulldogging, which is like dragging the cattle by their horns. And yeah, like he was known for that. He actually got kicked in the head by one, which is how he died, which obviously sucks. But I think he's in like the Rodeo Hall of Fame or something like that. Like they all had like individually really cool stuff, and he was actually half Cherokee as well. A lot of these characters had Native American ancestry, and that was part of their identity as well, which was also pretty much completely stripped, except for Cherokee Bill, you know, by name, but not necessarily by appearance and not by everything else. Because even Cherokee Bill in real life, he like ran to the tribes for help at some point to stay away from, because the guys were trying to get him for going AWOL from the Civil War. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but it's a lot of really cool stuff about these characters that I just want to talk about. I feel like I'm missing somebody here, but whatever. I think you get my point here. There are tons of really cool information. I think what they really should have done was just make a show. Maybe it still could have called The Harder They Fall, right? But then just have 2 episodes for Boss, 2 episodes for Nat Love, 2 episodes for Stagecoach Mary. Just go through certain periods of their life and just show how cool they were, rather than just making this like kind of like Power Rangers team up, which by the way was enjoyable, but did it really teach people anything about these historical figures? Did they learn anything more? No, because this wasn't really anything. I mean, did people go and research things? Because if these were all fictional characters, say they would just change names or whatever, all my criticism would go out the window. I'm like, okay, these are just brand new characters, whatever. But it's not. These are based on historical figures. It's like what I saw with Yasuke, that anime, where instead of kind of like going into the past and just like fleshing out the past and what made Nobunaga have the relationship with him, you know, they had him like they fast forward to the future, and now he's fighting mechs and werebears and stuff like that. Now, once again, I did enjoy this movie. I just think it was a missed opportunity to not fully flesh out these people, accurately portray them, and I think you could have got something even better than what we got. Even though what we got wasn't bad, just I think in terms of respect for the historical figures, didn't really do them justice. Let me know what you think. Did you know about these figures? Did you go and read up on them? How did you like the movie? Let's talk about it. Enter the Nerd.